Hey, everybody, welcome back to another Thrive After Dark episode. We have another guest for you, a good friend of ours, Dave Inglis. So, Dave, such a pleasure to have you here today. I'm so excited to share with our audience all of the things that you've done in your past and where you've landed right now. So people know who we're talking to. This is Dave Inglis. He is from Canada. We had the pleasure of meeting him through a mutual friend, Phil Jones, where the two of us got certified as guides in Phil's work, exactly what to say. But Dave, your resume is miles long with entrepreneurship, businesses, life lessons along the way that created some pivots in what you're doing right now. So walk us through that. Where did you start and how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, good question. I think most of us have journeys that are anything but linear, and as mine is no exception to that. The two of you know that. My background's actually in sports science of all things. So kinesiology is what I went to school for, and part of my kind of journey into that, Jessica and Justin, was breaking my back at a pretty young age. I broke my neck and my back when I was 16. I loved hockey. I had big aspirations, like most young athletes, to hopefully go and play somewhere big and meaningful and make a run out of it. And that was quickly, abruptly stopped, right, and halted. And I got into the whole field of concussions and research. I was lucky enough to be pulled aside in one of my latter years of studying at university. And the faculty member who was working with me said, Dave, you're great at a lot of things. Doing data analysis and research in Excel is not one of them. So we're wondering if you'd be interested in starting a business with us, because the research that we were doing was so meaningful and need to be brought to the world. I just kind of realized through that kind of foray that my best gift there was like raising capital, bringing it to the actual customers that are going to be using it. So unexpectedly, a business was born out of a research laboratory in Kitchener-Waterloo, where I went to school, and I ended up building that business for the first 2 or 3 years right out of school, and got into that. And I'm happy to kind of speak more to the details of it. But I had a pretty abrupt moment in that journey, Jessica, where my partner walked out on me. I came home one day, things were going real good, I thought. And I got walked out on, and it was a pretty abrupt wake-up call in that I was very committed to growing my business. Now looking back, I realize how deeply connected my sense of self-worth was to my net worth at that time and driving a lot of my behavior. But it was that moment that kind of took me to pause and ask myself, is this really what I want to be doing? How did I get here so suddenly and unexpectedly? And that's what led to me ultimately exiting that business and then getting into this wonderful journey I've been on now that's kind of been at the intersection of entrepreneurship, innovation, education, where I've taught entrepreneurship at Laurier for a number of years, helped faculty and alumni take, much like I did, seeds of their research and try and commercialize it. And then I went to a really great run building Canada's largest corporate innovation center, where I worked with a ton of executive teams in big companies like the banks and our Air Force to help them kind of inject that entrepreneurial attitude into everything that they do. And a question that I've always had all along is like, how do we win at home and at work? This was a question that was front of mind for me as I got into that consulting practice and new chapter in my life professionally, if you will. And it was by asking a lot of those questions when we'd be away for strategic offsites. I would often joke and say, fuck, like when was the last time we spent this much capital, time, and energy working on our most important team?
Right.
And, I think it was a bit of a rhetorical question because everybody knew it was significantly less than it should be, right? And so now, at that point in time, I had recently got married to Jen. We had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old suddenly in my life. I joked that I was an insta-dad kind of overnight to those two. And I took my second opportunity to really lead in a family environment really seriously. And I started to build my own master's in what I refer to as family leadership. And really now it's kind of been the intersection of those two things where I've kind of created this wonderful body of work that I get to do every single day now, write books about, talk about, and work with families on. So that's a medium-winded kind of arc into the precarious journey, if you will, that has just brought me to this moment with the two of you. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so rich in a lot of stories. I remember when we first met, the concept of, how do I win at home and at work? When you brought that up and we were in the room together, I remember thinking, this is my kind of people. This is exactly what we focus on. And I think that's the most simplest way to say it for people to kind of move away from this. How do you get balance? How do you do it all? When really it's like, no, you just want to win at home and you want to win at work. So let's talk about those two things, which brings us to your latest and greatest piece of work, the book that you released called Chief Family Officer. So obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, this all came about when you walked into your home, your previous partner was gone, and you had this epiphany of a moment of realizing, oh my gosh, I have put everything I've got into one category, and now everything else is no longer working. Which brings you to all the way years and years of work and learning and experience to formulating this book, Chief Family Officer, which I had the privilege of reading before it was put out there to the world. Incredible book. Tell us a little bit about this and what people can learn from it when they pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, where to begin, right? I mean, Chief Family Officer, I feel like sometimes books, this is my first book that I've ever written. Some really interesting perspective that was shared with me from the editor that I've been working with is you have to realize that most people don't buy your book to read your book. They buy your book to place your book on their desk to remind them about the idea of the book.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And Chief Family Officer, I think, communicates a really important idea that we can take winning plays and mindsets that many of us are so committed to professionally and apply that in our most important company, our family. And so the subtitle of my book is Using Winning Plays from Work to Put Your Family First. And how I kind of came to this was, I had mentioned I would jokingly ask to some folks that I was working with, hey, when was the last time you'd spend time and energy on your most important family? It was through continual dialogue around that I realized, I used to often say, how you do one thing is how you did everything. In my experience, with being walked out on, I was reminded of how untrue that is in many contexts. My audio wasn't matching my video, right? And as I was speaking to leaders, I was just really clear to me that, gosh, we have so many gifts that go unutilized in the areas that matter most, like things like building a really compelling vision. Gosh, I've met so many wonderful leaders who are charged with the responsibility of guiding their organizations or their teams through change, and they're able to do that. But when it comes to doing that at home, it's like, why aren't we getting on the same page? Why doesn't everybody understand where we're going and what's most important? Or even things like being able to buy back your time. Shit, I mean, working with entrepreneurs is something they're always thinking about, is how do I bring my capital back in the business to elevate myself at a certain role so I can do more important things? But when it comes to painting rocks with my son Will after school, like a lot of leaders aren't taking that same skill they have to fire themselves from jobs to be done around the house so they can spend more of their limited time doing the things that either make them more money or bring them more intimately connected with the people that they love. And so that was really kind of the observation that I started to see here is, hey, there's a whole group of leaders who I know when I talk to them, they want to win at work, they want to win at home, but they're over-indexed. They're putting way too much of this time and energy into the workplace. And what kind of dawned on me is the wonderful opportunity to leverage the nomenclature, some of the tools and the thinking that we do so well, and challenge and support leaders to do that in arguably one of the most difficult environments you could ever bring your leadership skills to. I believe the home is one of the most difficult and advanced arenas to lead in. And what an appropriate place to be able to do it. And that was really the kind of inspiration around this, was like, why not both? This is a question I ask myself all the time. I think compromise is the lazy man's way to closure. I truly believe that. And, why not both is a question that I think we should always be asking, but it doesn't happen by chance. And so by asking that question and looking at all the great tools that so many of us already had, kind of created a wonderful foundation to build this body of work on that I'm calling Chief Family Officer. So it's been a ton of fun. And truthfully, when I wrote the book, this is an interesting thing. My wife, Jen, she's so brilliant. Both of you have met her. She is a total expert in pediatric mental health. She wrote a book about 4 years ago, and it's called The Umbrella Project, or The Umbrella Effect, rather.
I have it.
And she already had the book, like, in her mind. So she sat down to write it.
Yeah.
Mine was totally different. Mine was like, I know there's a book in here, but I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And I'm going to commit to this process of writing a book to allow this process to pull it out of me. And so it's been about a 2-year journey of really kind of chiseling the rock back and building this body of work in a very creative space. So it's been a ton of fun. And what's most fun of it for me is being able to see the rubber meet the road, to be in the world now, teaching this, working with leaders. And, I've worked with a lot of teams over the years. Working with people on their families is one of the greatest honors and privileges I could really have. It's the most important team, and pretty cool to kind of see this full circle now, bringing me back to work in an area that was one that I really struggled at myself. And I'm a big believer that your greatest gifts are often found by your biggest pains. And I had a painful experience being walked out on. I had even more painful experiences earlier in my life as it related to family. And it's not lost on me that I've found my way to work in an area that's been so challenging for me in my life. What a blessing and a gift. So that's kind of the essence of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and Dave, before the book, obviously you used to do actual events or retreats for couples.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, I think you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you in there, the chicken and the egg, which one came first? Was it the idea for the book, which spurred on the events, or was it the events that said, hey, I think I have an idea here?
Yeah, so it was kind of neat. And I think some of the best things, like the things that really need to be in this world, kind of start to find their way there, right? And it was pretty organic, Justin, through some of the strategy offsites that I would lead. So I would often take executive teams away for 3 or 4 days, go to a lovely hotel. We'd dial in what their game plan was for the business. And inevitably what started to happen was, hey, Dave, you stick around for an extra day? Oh, why? Well, you know that shit we talked about over dinner? I was talking about it with a couple of people on the team, and we'd really love it if you could stick around for a half day or a day just to help us get clear on how everybody needs to individually posture their families to support this really big ambition that we have, to make sure that we're not building success at the cost of our people. And one thing kind of led to another where I started to build a bit of a reputation for that. And, teams I started to work with, Justin, and kind of expanding the retreats that we already had, it was like, hey, we kind of just want you to come for this piece. Like, we're doing the strategy stuff, but can you kind of come back for this? And so, not too dissimilar in the coaching conversations that I was having, this is kind of what kind of brought me into this too, Justin, was, you start on one thing, talking about maybe a challenge between a business partner and really deconstructing the dynamics there and helping somebody better understand themselves through that conflict. And then you realize, well, where is this showing up most? Oh, with my spouse, day to day. Interesting. Why don't we keep pulling on that thread? So it really was just kind of a natural evolution. And put differently, when we kind of started to do the work and we teased out some of the problems that it would create, ultimately the families were the ones that were being kind of the bearers of some of the commitments that a lot of these leaders were having. And they just weren't challenged and supported yet to be as intentional as they were about their business with the people that they love the most. So pretty organic, Justin. That's where it kind of came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at, you working with executives and then getting to the layer of what was actually causing potential harm to their performance or their ability to feel happiness and joy. Now, fast forward, are you going to be working from that angle, or are you going to come straight through the family angle? Are you still going to work with executives? Are you still going to go through hey, we're going to talk about performance here. We're going to rate where you're coming from, where your mental focus is, your emotional health. Or are you going to go straight to hey, I'm going to start working with couples that I know are in high profile jobs or high earners, and we're going to solely focus on home life?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is why not both, I guess, right?
Yeah, sure, exactly.
Because I firmly believe that it really is about winning at home so you can win at work, and winning at home so you can win at work, right? Like it's about doing both of those. And I believe that a strong home is the foundation that we launch off of to work, right? Yep. So to me, even if it starts from the family, it's important to help somebody understand how that actually supports them outside of their home. Right? The meaning that we do things. And I think my experience has certainly taught me that unless we can kind of connect the dot there and help somebody see the meaning of leading into that work, more often than not, what inevitably happens is they don't actually work on their family until there's a really big issue.
Right.
right? And human nature, we all got to wait till pain gets big enough to go and do something with it, right? But I'm a big advocate for prehab, not rehab in relationships. So I guess my answer to your question is kind of both ways, because I feel like really that's the whole essence of this work, is deeply connecting the two and making sure they're very aligned and you're not leaving that to chance, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I would answer your question.
Yeah. Do you think, because I believe in the same philosophy, I mean, we both do. It's our business is built on this concept completely. And so we tend to get a lot of transparency. We've created I would say, a safe space at work where people will bring forth the reality of what they're dealing with at home and how it's affecting them here in the workplace, or vice versa. I'm not performing. We peel back the layers. And there's usually something in the home life that needs to be dealt with. So when you're helping folks like that and you can foresee what's causing this type of wrench in the system, how do you actually work through that? Because a lot of people, I'd say, especially right now, I don't know about in Canada, I imagine it's very similar, but we are having a plethora of empowered groups show up. Everyone's a coach now, without a lot of authority.
Substance
and yet,
behind it, right?
That's being spearheaded everywhere. So how do you differentiate yourself from someone that's actually saying, no, we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to do the work. I've got some framework that we can work with. I'm not a therapist. That's not what this is. But I can lead you through, a step-by-step process that will get you a better outcome.
Yeah. So I guess your question is like, how do you separate the signal from the noise in that, right? Like the folks who can really help and the folks who are able to talk about trying to help. Is that what you mean, Jess? Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah. I think, how do you differentiate as, you've done such incredible work, Dave, not just, we're staying focused on the chief family officer and really working out a more healthy home life so that you can perform better in work. But you have such a great background in serving executives and leadership teams and building businesses. How do you help others through these types of moments in life when you're not a therapist and you don't want it to turn into that kind of clinical therapy? Because I do think, I guess what I'm saying is, I think there's some danger in today's society where everyone's a coach. Everyone's looking and trying to monetize a conversation with them. And how do you stand out from that?
Yeah. Okay. I really understand your question now. Thanks for elaborating a little bit there. There are a lot of really great tools and frameworks and different things that we can all go and acquire and get, and those are really helpful. And don't get me wrong, I use many of those foundationally, whether it's kind of in principle or very practically in some of the work that we do. When it comes to differentiating, though, I think fundamentally, whether it's a business coach or somebody who's helping you with your family, you got to work with somebody who has been there, done it, and has done a level of work on themselves where their vulnerability can be a flashlight to help guide you towards levels of depth and connection and vulnerability that you're not used to yourself. So can I share a quick story, an example around this?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, speaking of after dark. So one of the things that, in the hero's journey, you kind of know the journey you're on, right? And then there's this thing called the boon. The boon is the unexpected gift you kind of pull out of the dark forest you come home with.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So, I go into this process, knowing what's in front of me, well supported to be able to write this book. In this book, as you know, Jess, you've read this. Justin, you probably have flipped through it too a bit. I choose to share some really honest stories. There's a story in here that I share about a pretty important moment in my life when I broke my back. And I remember going to the hospital. I grew up in a family where my dad was a business owner, which meant that he was at business a lot of times. And there was, recitals or games that I wish he was there on. This was one of those moments that he wasn't there, but I wished he was. And I asked my mom to call my dad when she, we kind of gone through the triage of the hospital. She came back and said, Dad can't come, or Dad's not coming. And it totally shook me. It was one of those moments that definitely planted a seed. And I was like hell, I'm going to show you that I can build a bigger business, a better business. and be an incredible dad at the exact same time. I'm never going to be missing these types of moments. That planted a seed for me for like 20 years, guys. That was like a chip on my shoulder, a huge motivator to go and do that. So I write this book. And I call my dad. I say, Dad, I got this book. I've been writing this. I'd like you to read it.
Yeah.
I want you to read it because this is an honest recollection of my experiences. It's important for me to share these experiences because if I'm asking folks to be vulnerable and to really soften into the hard stuff in their life, I think it is incumbent upon myself that I am a demonstration.
Yes.
This is kind of going to your question,
Yeah.
right? It's like, let me show you rather than tell you.
Yes.
And I like to walk through this. Can I send you it? Will you read it? Here's a couple of kind of key sections. Can we connect on it? Yeah, no problem. I send it over to him. So we get on the phone and my dad's, a little frustrated. A little frustrated, I think, for a number of different reasons. But the one that I'll point out here is he says, it's hard for me just to read these things because these are the general dynamics of any family. We all have stories like this. And I think the general kind of sentiment is gosh, wish I could have gone back and done a few things differently. All well and good. But he says to me, Dave, you know what's really interesting? I read your book and I never knew you broke your back.
I never knew.
He never knew you broke your back.
And I said, what? You never knew I broke my back? He's like, yeah, I was just talking to Sandy, it's his wife. I read it and I just been heartbroken because I didn't know that happened. And we did, just for context, like we didn't speak to each other for a couple of years after that,
right?
Given my experience of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says, I never got that phone call.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I never got that phone call.
Wow.
Right away, I'm just sitting here. I'm like, holy smokes. Talk about the boom. Like getting something you didn't think you were expecting to get out of that. And I remember hanging up the phone and going to the kitchen with my wife, Jen, and just being, gosh, I just realized that there's a story that I have held not just near and dear to my heart. Like this is foundational.
Driving force, right?
For me. And I've realized that the story that I have is a result of me hearing a half-told story.
Perspective.
And so I share this because, when it comes to differentiating yourself, this is not a transaction, the work that I'm in, guys. This is a transmission. This is not a transaction for me. And so the way that I choose to go about this work is, yes, being well studied, yes, having lots of tools, lots of frameworks, but I will never ask you to go somewhere I have not gone my own. And the whole way there, I will walk alongside you because I am not a teacher to a student. I am a student who is going to model what exceptional student behavior looks like. To be somebody who's walking with people doing this work. And I think this is just a big philosophy for me. It's like, I don't ever want to find myself being somebody standing on a stage, proclaiming that I have it all figured out. I have a young family right now. We are all adapting.
Yes.
I am a student of my own medicine. But the best thing that I could ever do to inspire somebody to lean into this work is to be a demonstration of what it looks like to model what a good student behavior looks like. And I think foundationally, like I can't compete on content and tools. Everybody else can go and acquire those. Where I can compete, where I can be very different, is being able to do an uncommon level of work on myself to be able to be comfortable enough to meet people where they're at and to use the vulnerability of stories like I just shared with you. Like when I meet with leaders and I share these real stories, I'll often have lineups after being like, fuck the tools and the frameworks you just shared me. I just realized that I really have a conversation to have with somebody that I love who the last 15 fucking years, I took their version of their story from my eyes. I never actually asked them if they saw the same story.
Yep.
Not only that, but Dave, I have to go home and I have to make sure I understand the meaning that my kids are attributing to the experiences they've had with me. And I'm going to have a deeper commitment to understanding the stories my kids tell themselves. Like, do you see where I'm going now with this, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a transmission. It's not a transaction. There's no tools. And so I feel like fundamentally, to answer your question, I'm not even playing the same game.
Beautiful.
I'm not even playing the same game. So That's how I tend to think about it. And for me, why I'm so proud of that perspective is it means that I've committed to a high watch.
Mm-hmm.
A high watch on myself. And truthfully, I think looking back, it's funny when you kind of give a dedication to somebody in the book. Of course, I dedicate this book to my kids. Of course, I dedicate it to the great readers and listeners who are hopefully going to be applying some of this. Most importantly, I built this thing for myself. May I be a student of this work, you know? So that's how I think of it.
So good.
Well, and the highest degree of accountability you could ever give yourself is not only writing it down, but also sharing it. And that's the ultimate share.
Yeah,
right?
to live up, live up, live up. Yeah, that's incredible. When you think about the work that you're helping people go through, and specifically in the chief family officer, if we keep it in the home base, and how this is your most important team, and when you get it right here, doing it right to everywhere else, or getting it better everywhere else, becomes just significantly easier. What are some of the steps you could say without somebody reading this book yet? And this book, just so I can explain from a third party person, it's a workbook. It's something you can you give step by step, go do this, try this, write this down. And I think that's what differentiates this book from many other self-help books, personal development books, whatever you want to call it, is it really is a guide. It's a beautiful, beautiful guide as to how to get to doing the work, how the work is done, which is relative to each family. And so there is this autonomous piece to it that you get to apply, which I found to be really just profound in it. It was really a great read. Okay, so if people are listening to this and like, oh yeah, Dave, oh my gosh, me too. And now you're making me think. What would you say would be the first couple steps in the how to start thinking around your home team and how to rise and be a student and lead by example? What would you say?
Yeah. Gosh, happy to answer this. You know, in the book, I talk about these three landscapes of leadership that I feel like is incumbent on any leader who's committed to winning at home needs to get familiar with and pretty well versed in. I want to be really clear, like I fully believe in a first principle being that like you are the doctor of the future. You are. And what I mean by that is like, I don't think we need to have an outside dependency for somebody else to do this work for us. I feel like everybody who reads this book is responsible for doing the work themselves, right? And like being in it. But these three landscapes, one is like family strategy. So in a business, if you want to go and win, you got to know what winning means.
Yep.
Right? So there's your family strategy, making sure your family's making big choices on things like where do we live and what are we doing for work and who do we hang out with? Those are big things that you can change that have a profound impact on the quality of your life and the nature of it, right? Second area would be systems of living. So if you think of a business, not just strategy, but you have your operational pieces. How do we get things done? How do we buy back time? That's one field. And the other one is like the guts of relationships, right? How do we actually deal with conflict? What does that look like? So those are the three, right, landscapes that I encourage folks to kind of start to explore and get really good at and build skills around.
So good.
But where do you start? Where do you start? So a question I always ask, last week I was away with a wonderful group of business owners. And before I even got into the day, I said, I want you to take a piece of paper and I want you to write down two things for me. Firstly, what do you believe your partner's number one complaint is about you?
Ooh.
I want you to write that down. What do you think the number one complaint of your partner is about you? And of course, as you can imagine, depending on who's in the room, it gets pretty chatty, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us kind of like to reflect on and almost poke fun at all the silly shit that we do that our partner can't stand, right?
Yes.
And then I asked him, I said, great, now that you have that scale of 1 to 10, how certain are you that you're right? How certain are you that you're right? And the room shifts pretty fucking quickly. Because one of two things happen. Either one is you have a group in the room who will bet their bottom dollar that they are dead right. They are right on target. And you got others who kind of realize really quietly in that moment, they have no fucking idea what their partner's biggest complaint is of them. So I feel like where do you start? I mean, if I think about trying to course correct a company that is struggling, to course correct a family that is maybe dealing with challenges financially. You know what you do? You look at current state and you get real honest with it. And in a family, when the two of you, part of your magic together is that the two of you through business and at home have learned how to work together. Mm-hmm. And I often joke, it's not necessarily about sex and money. It's about how you talk about sex. Mm-hmm. In the issue that you have. It's not about the issue. It's about how do you talk about the issue.
Yes.
So if you want to get better at leading at home, here's a big idea. Learn how to be a better business partner with your spouse. Mm-hmm. And there are huge gains to be made in even just having an accurate understanding, like what is the number one complaint that my partner has about me? Quick example of this. I like talking absolute sometimes. And in our family, just, last few weeks and months, we've been really focused on trying to get the kids to get their shit together on the weekend so that Monday at 7 a.m., I'm not looking for socks.
Yes.
Like, silly stuff. But when you got young kids, it's like this stuff drives you nuts.
Yeah. Oh, we get it.
Right? Sure, y'all can relate. Mm-hmm. And so, one morning I'm saying to the kids as they're asking for socks on Monday morning, I'm like, see, you guys never do the things we talk about on the weekend. Here we are again. We're never prepared for the week. And it's not that I'm wrong. It's just, it's not true.
Right.
And so when you talk to Jen, she'll say like, that's a big complaint of hers of mine is that I'm like, in theory, I'm on target. Like I'm not wrong to call this out. And it's something that we've already on the same page about trying to get better at as a family. Like we talk about this stuff. Mm-hmm. But in the moment when it's Monday morning and I said, you guys never do this, you guys always do this, she's just like, you totally lose me. And so it's a big complaint of hers.
Right.
If I know what that is, do you know how fucking easy it is?
So easy.
Mm-hmm.
So easy. And so I think that's a really great place to start is like just have the intellectual humility and the desire to try and understand what others' experience of you is. Mm-hmm. And remember that their perception is their reality. You may not agree with the importance of it, but it doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
So that's a really, really great place to start. Another one that I often kind of encourage folks to have, and obviously right out of that, I'm saying your number one conversation when you get home, guys, is go and see if you have this right with your partner. Not, hey, Justin, what's your number one complaint of me? Hey, I was thinking of you. We can all be pains in the asses, but like, I'd like to see if I have an accurate understanding, Justin, of what your number one complaint of is me. Do you mind if I share it and to see how close I am? Right?
Yeah.
So being able to get on the same page of that without this need to go and solve it. Like if you just understand it, better awareness leads to better choices lead to better results. Mm-hmm. You guys know that to be true. Mm-hmm. Awareness is a lot. So being able to see that. And then another kind of place to get started, Jess, I go back to family strategy. Right, as kind of a foundational piece. Another question I like to ask in the leadership teams that I work with is, scale of 1 to 10, how clear are you on what it means for your business to win? They'll write down some numbers. And maybe while I have the two of you, why don't we do this? So Jess and Justin, scale of 1 to 10, get Thrive Realty.
Yep.
How clear are we on what it means for that business to win? Justin? 1 to 10. 10 being like lights out clear. People on your team can say it if you weren't here in the room and it'd be the same fucking answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're 8.5, 9. We're strong.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'd
Jess,
say
you up there too, or would you?
I'd say we're lights out clear. I'd say 10. I'm clear. Yeah, I think great. Majority of staff would be clear.
How clear are you what it means to win personally as an individual? So for Dave, how clear am I on what it means for me to have a meaningful, fulfilled life here and what it means for me to win? Mm-hmm. How clear are the two of you on that?
Gosh, that's ever evolving. I'd say I've been doing a lot of work on this recently, so I'm going to say I'm at about a 9 with that for me personally.
I was going to peg that at a 9 also, and I would have guessed hers to be a 9.
I'm glad we're pegging.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Wonderful models here. And then the third question is, how clear are you on what it means for your family to win together? Together.
Right. These are great questions. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious for your answers.
That
if
one
you think
becomes
about,
more
business
challenging.
is high. We're around an 8 or a 9. Personally, we feel really high too. Is it the same, or could it be possible that your family is a little less clear on what it means to win? I don't know. It's your answer.
Yeah. I mean, when I start thinking through the context of, you used with Thrive, if we went to any of the employees, how clear are they? Now, if I start thinking in the context of my children.
How clear are my children? Yeah.
They're like, does that have to do with my iPad or anything like I don't necessarily know how clear they would be.
I think we could get lost in the weeds and say the dynamics are interesting, right? Just like you, Dave, we have a 20-year-old and then we have all the way down to a 7-year-old. And so clarity is relative, but I do feel most of our family, I'd say our entire family, is clear on our principles and values.
Yes. Yeah, that for sure.
Yeah. And so if that's true, then their clarity around our family winning together, I believe is high.
Should be strong.
Yeah, I'd say we're work on this. I'd say it's high. I'd say a 9. Only because, I'm obsessed with improvement, Dave. So,
well, I was going to say, and like, it's not lost on me that I'm talking to two individuals who are deeply committed to doing this, and you didn't start yesterday, right?
Yes, so, yes.
And in a lot of the rooms when I'm asking these questions, you can see why I'm asking.
Yes, so good.
I'm looking at creating some contrast, right? And to the spirit of your question, which is like, where does one begin?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been shocked. One of the biggest things that has shocked me in this work, I do a lot of couples coaching now, is how delusional we are and how much we feel like we actually understand what our partner actually wants or sees themselves in what their experience is.
Mm-hmm.
And so this question of like, how clear are you for what it means to your family to win? When I'm asking this in groups, more often than not, it's like 992.
Yes, right.
Right? And even sometimes if the numbers are different, you can just see somebody's clarity around what it means to win. If we don't have that clear, it's hard to anchor and make decisions on anything else.
Yes.
Right? So as far as like another starting spot, it's, are you and your partner on the same page of what it means for us to win together? And when was the last time you changed that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, in a business, we're always operating off of different horizons. You kind of have your current year, your next year, multiple years out, kind of mapping it out. But in a family, like how we orient ourselves day to day, week to week, it changes so quickly. And this question around like, what does it mean for us to win? More often than not, I mean, even in our family, gosh, about 3 years ago when we had first met Jess,
mm-hmm.
we were privately really struggling with one of our kids' mental health.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where we were really scared about some pretty significant things happening in our home. What winning meant then, very different
yes.
than what winning means now.
Yes.
And I'll be the first to admit to you that when we were going through that, I had a vision of what it meant for me and our family to win, which was greatly misaligned with the reality of our situation. And I think that as leaders, if nothing else, if we can recalibrate our shared understanding of what winning means now, I'm all for the planning, but I mean, like, as far as like improving life at home, like this week, this month,
right?
It's like, what does winning mean now? Now meaning like, based on the external environment that we're in, based on this thing called like the internal marketplace of like, how am I feeling? How are we doing? Right? Like, what does winning mean now? And sometimes winning means like getting back to the basics.
Right. Yes.
Right? Back to the basics and getting those foundations back. And I think the more we can be really clear around what that is, it helps us have some better discernment around, well, what is the right next thing? Okay, so if this is what winning means, like for Jen and I, when she was getting back into work, what winning meant is that we both could put a full day's work into work and do something that we loved. And we could also, go and play tennis together. And we could also have time with our kids. And so when we looked at what winning meant and then we compared it to where we were, we realized, gosh, big dreams, zero capacity. So the right next thing for us to kind of work on as a family is how do we maybe buy back some of our time to get some capacity to go and do those things? Because if we don't have capacity, we can't do any of this.
Yes.
And again, compromise is a lazy man's way to closure.
Right.
So we weren't willing to compromise on that. That helped us start to go down this pathway of bringing in au pairs. And we've had 5 au pairs over the last 2 years. It's been a game changer for us. And they don't take care of our kids. They help take care of our home and our space so that we can be with our kids.
That's right.
But you see where I'm going with this? If you're clear on what it means to win now, well, then you've created context to get kind of clear on what the right next thing should be. And improving life at home and running your family, much like in business, is just doing a series of the right next thing.
Yes.
After the right next thing, after the right next thing, right?
Just
and being really attuned
step
to what's going on. So that's how I would answer your question. Those are kind of 2 areas that I would kind of step into is, do you know what the primary complaint is? Because you can really improve life at home if you really get that. And then just make sure you're regularly recalibrating on this idea of winning.
Yeah.
Right? And getting on the same page.
redefining constantly because it does evolve, and that's what I meant. It's so relative, right? Especially with kids involved. They're evolving at such a rapid rate that you do have to recalibrate quite frequently.
Yeah.
You were talking about something that we have done. I think this came out of the global pandemic. We created almost a foundational statement that if we came from this place, everything else would fall into place. And it was clarity equals engagement. And so it's right along the exact same lines of what you're talking about is if you're not clear and you can't articulate it clearly and you don't even understand the vision clearly, how can you actually engage and take action together or independently to make anything come true? So it's been a foundational element, not only at Thrive, but certainly at home too, to keep us all clear. And it brought me to an idea that we do with our kids. So like I said, right, 20 down to 7 and everything in between. And then you've got us. One thing we do to make sure we've got socks Monday morning is on Sundays, after we've broken bread together and we kind of have that really beautiful family moment in the morning, we usually do absolutely nothing. No commitments on Sunday is usually the
That's
rule
our
of
status
thumb.
quo. That's where we like to exist.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, that's our preference. Now, sometimes things come up and we don't follow that rule, but that's a primary rule in the house. Like, we're not going to do anything. We're sticking around the house. We're doing home stuff, family stuff. And then after we've done breakfast and everyone's awake and ready, I ask all of the children and Justin, would you like me, would it be helpful if I made you a list of the family chores that need to get done today? Or do you already have it down pat? And every single Sunday, without fail, the entire family says, yes, please make me a list. And then I'll do about one Sunday every couple of months where I'll say, family chores, like, have at it. I don't offer a list. Just to gauge, again, clarity equals engagement. Where are we at? How clear are we on the win for a Sunday?
Well, and what's funny is our youngest, Joseph, will sometimes literally then go make a list for him and his sister, because he values that list so much. Yeah. And it's been interesting to watch that kind of compound between the kids. Yeah. Needing that clarity. Yeah. Yeah. So
I
awesome
love that.
stuff.
And I think what I really love about that is it's very ritualized in your home. And there's a bit of a element that, like, it feels like a bit of a system, like a system of living that you guys have together, right? And systems are great. Like, when it comes to scaling a company, there's great systems like the EOS model, Entrepreneur's Operating System. But it's a good invitation, to think about, which is, what's our family operating system? What are the ways that we kind of regroup and reset around these types of things as the seasons of our life continue to unfold? Yeah. That's really great that you guys do that. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, we've found over the years that we're the type of family that thrives in routine and consistency. And the moment that goes away, all hell breaks loose. Yeah, it takes us a minute to recalibrate. Like, our kids become zombies. We feel like we're completely falling off the wagon, even though it's only been 24 hours. And we have to have that consistency.
We enjoy the system, the operating system. It definitely keeps things clear. Yeah. It's easier to engage. Well, okay. One final thought from me, or actually question for you, Dave. When you're looking at your own family, because like you said, I'm a student of my practices and what I preach. I learn on behalf of what I do on a daily basis. What are a few things that you do to prioritize your marriage with Jen? It's something that's come up quite a bit for Justin and I. It's a constant question we get is how do you guys prioritize your relationship, and how do you get the effect of a great relationship and good communication? And we always talk about the cause, like, what do we do to cause that? So what is it that you would say right off the rip that you and Jen do to prioritize weekly putting your marriage first?
Yeah. So it's a practice that we call the family base camp, is what we do. And this is something that we do every 2 or 3 months. Okay. And we have a beautiful hotel that we love to go to called the Allura Mill. And we like to go away for a night together just to kind of design, I use that word very intentionally, design the next 2 or 3 months. So you're to a point of like not leaving that type of stuff to chance. When I used to do Ironman races, I was taught the principle of forced optimization strategy pretty fucking quickly. What that means is you don't leave the important things to chance. So with massages in my knees, it's like I used to wait until I couldn't run before calling Dale, my masseuse, to ask for a massage. And then he's like, dude, like getting injuries is an occupational hazard of the commitment you've chosen. So proactively carve out your massage every week and prepay for it for the year. Like set your default to be following through on it, right? And so when Jen and I are sitting down and kind of designing out the next few months, it's very much what we're thinking through. It's like, what are the real important things, whether it's just Jen and I and picking out those days, or even with the kids and playing hooky with them regularly and having some one-on-one time with each of them, is just making sure we schedule our life before our meetings. Like, that's the answer to your question. How do we do it? It's like, well, every single fucking week is different. I could be on the west coast of Canada one week, and then all of a sudden Jen's gone the next week, and we don't really kind of see each other. And so for us, it's a matter of just kind of pedaling before the wave of life and just making sure that we schedule our life before our meetings. It's simple. It's so easy to do, and it's so easy not to do.
It's so easy not to do.
And it only ever always works.
Yes.
But that's the I just, the more we kind of follow through on this. And then the other piece that I would say is, like, for Jen and I, you guys are, obviously familiar with the love languages. You've heard of love languages,
yes.
right? Love languages, to me, as I've kind of gone into this work, it's kind of like black and white television. You can get like HD, well, 1080p. What are we at now? Just like 4K? We're not even there anymore, right? You can get way higher fidelity in your understanding of your partner's emotional needs. There's a great book called Fair Proofing Your Marriages. William Hartley, I'm probably getting his name wrong. Point is one of the things that I learned through that work with Jen and I is that recreational companionship, goofy term, but recreational companionship is a really important emotional need that both Jen and I have.
Okay.
Which is being able to go and enjoy the pursuit of adventure and sport with somebody else, like the companionship that comes from going to do something.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, that's something that we have really been thoughtful around. And as seasons change, where you guys live in Michigan and we're in Canada, like for the winter, it's curling, and spring and summer, it's tennis. But like, we have our outlet for that. And we're very clear on treating that just as we do for our kids' camp, where we're up at fucking 7 a.m. to get on the deadline to get there. Like, we treat those things just as seriously, right? So recreational companionship is a big thing. But the way we got there to make sure that's the right thing is really being students of our needs and spending the time to develop an uncommon level of clarity, leads to engagement, around what really good engagement together could look like, right? And for us, recreational companionship happens to be one of those that, like, we wouldn't have had language for. Once we kind of discovered it, we were like, oh, yeah, this is totally us. And now that we've kind of had that clarity, it's been a winning formula for us.
Amazing.
Big time.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's something we talk about. Most people talk about that, I would say, in hobbies. Like, what is your hobby? What do you love to do? What are your passion pieces? So as people are thinking through this with what you just said, maybe they've labeled it differently. And that's essentially what you're saying. Or, hey, these things make me happy. I like to do them just because, they make my heart sing. Okay, so in whether you want this debuted or not, Dave, I am dying to know about Spain.
Sure. Where do you want to go?
Okay, so you had shared you are leaving. You're going to move there. Are you moving the whole family to Spain in the fall?
The whole gaggle, even our dog Mango, she's coming too. Yeah, so happy to explain. Anything and everything.
Yeah,
we've talked about
really
this so many times.
This subject is just so, we are like, tell us everything, because we have thought about these things all the time. So why Spain, and what are you going to do from Spain?
Yeah, so would it help if I kind of explain how we got there, like the decision making, and then Spain, and then kind of what we're going to do over there?
Yes, let's hear it.
When it comes to strategy, I'm just going to kind of reference this back to like how we kind of thought about this, because this is very strategic for us as a family. It's not, as much as I like to fly by the seat of my pants, this was not one of those.
Okay.
Especially when you have so many lives and a big shift involved, right?
Yeah.
So strategy, what does it mean to win? When you're clear on that in business or family, you can then start to talk about, where do we play? And where do you play is like, where do we live? What do we do for work? And who do we hang out with? Those are like, I firmly believe those three things, you change those, you're fundamentally pivoting your strategy.
Okay.
Whether that's Thrive deciding to spin up a West Coast office, right? Where do you play? Going to new markets, or getting involved in different kind of categories in the space that you're in. Changing where you play is a big deal. So you have, what does it mean to win? Where do we play? And then how do we win if we're going to play in those areas, right? Fundamentally, those three questions: what does it mean to win? Where do we play? How do we win if we're going to be playing in those areas?
Okay.
That's like the core of strategy, right? You follow me on this?
Yes.
One of the big things for us and what it means to win is that our kids are supported and challenged to develop academically.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys in Michigan, but in Ontario right now, the public school system is not exactly one that is cultivating an environment of challenge and support. I won't go into the details. It's not the purpose of our time together.
Yep.
Point being is when it came to what it meant to win and where we were playing, without changing that, we have been spending a lot of our time and energy trying to figure out how the hell do we win if we keep the kids here.
Right.
We've made some really intentional efforts in that. We've seen some marginal improvement, but very, very marginal.
Yeah, right.
Not to the level where our kids are saying, I can't wait to go and wake up in the morning and go and do the things that I love to go and do. And I like to live in a sense of urgency. I don't want to figure this out on Quinn's last day in grade 12 as she's going into grade 11, right? Like, I firmly believe do what you can now. So for us, after trying to influence that kind of component of how do we win, what can we do to make winning here better, we kind of got to a breaking point where we were like, this isn't working. And truthfully, our daughter Quinn came to us because another part of what it means for us to win for Jen and I and the family is that we can live strategically in 2 or 3 different locations in the world. Like, that's a dream that we have. That's our version of winning, right?
Yeah.
And so Quinn came to us one day, and when your kids are telling you something, you really want to be listening. And she pulled us aside and said, a year and a half ago, when we talked about moving somewhere for a year or even half a year, wouldn't budge on it. I was just starting high school. Wow, I see what grade 11 and grade 12 look like now, and I'm ready to go when you guys are.
Wow.
So for us, much like in business, if you want to make a big change strategically, you don't just cut the wire on everything you're doing and bail.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So longer term, we'd love to be able to live in multiple different places, but to start with one, to go for a year to see what breaks is a great small bet. And I get the joke that this is a small bet, right? But relative to like selling your home and moving permanently, the kids have their dad here too. And there's there's a small experiment that we can run as a family.
Yes.
So we started to kind of look at that as our driving force. Was like, how do we improve the environmental conditions for our kids? What does that look like? And how do we do that in a way where we don't compromise on the things that are really important to us? So this kind of bleeds into like, why Spain? And like, how did we kind of get there? So we started to look upwards, and strategically, you don't just come up with one idea to solve your problem, come up with
options.
3 different possible options, right?
Totally.
So we looked at Dubai, we looked at Costa Rica, we looked at Portugal. Spain wasn't even on the map. All together, we're kind of looking at it. I won't bore you with the details, but we kind of land on Portugal. Everybody really likes it. It's a direct flight. Cost of living is a fraction of where we are now. Really good schools around there. Great weather, as you would imagine. And then we were talking, we were like, you know what? One of the best investments or things that we get from this year is going to be learning a new language. And when the hell are we ever going to speak Portuguese?
Right.
Right.
So we're like, well, okay. Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world. And if you look next door to Portugal, you got Spain. We've been to Spain before. We loved it.
Okay.
And we started to do some research and realize that there are an abundance of Canadian families committed to the academic and sport career of their kids who have moved to Valencia. That's just south of Barcelona. And it's so funny, right? Because you do this 20 years ago, and gosh, like when we went back in February, we were able to have lunch with the parent of a family who's from Toronto, who moved there with their kids and are going to the school that we were thinking of sending our kids to. So we were able to go boots on the ground and say, like, does this feel right? Does it look right? And once we got there and we toured the schools and we took a hypothesis and kind of tested it, we got there ourselves. Boy, we jumped on the plane back home. We're like, we're fucking going.
We're doing this thing.
Sure. And it's interesting, by taking that, like this whole process, we feel like we've been really supported the whole way. And I mean that in a way that you might not anticipate. Like from a faith perspective or spiritually, it feels like this has been really easy. It feels like things have just been kind of like lining up for us along the way. It doesn't feel hard.
Lovely.
So that's what's kind of Spain. And then what are we going to do? You know what? we're doing same seed, different soil. We're doing the same fucking thing we do here.
Yeah. Because you do, I mean, it's primarily remotely, right? Both of you. And you travel to the destinations you need to be at to do the work you're doing. So why not just travel from Spain?
Exactly. You know what? Opens up a new market to Europe. I'll be back here once a month. And it actually is a gift in that I get to kind of intensify my work while I'm traveling and then kind of pull off when I'm back. And we'll see. I mean, it's not going to go perfectly.
Sure.
It's going to be challenges, but
neither is today, though.
Right.
Right? Neither is living in Canada and doing it. So why not be imperfectly perfect in Spain?
75-degree weather with paella.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. And when life is punctuated by Americanos and glasses of red wine, like twist my arm, right?
I know. Darn
it's a bit of a different culture there.
You let us know when you're settled because we're ready.
A work to live, not so much a live to work type of disposition, right? Culturally speaking. And so, yeah, when we were there, came back, super excited about that. And to your point, Justin, like it's exactly what it is here anyway. We know what it is. That was a thing that the kid's dad rightly brought up. He's like, well, what about the transition coming back to Ontario? What if that's going to be hard? And it's like, well, it's already hard here.
Yeah.
Like, it's just pick your version of it, right? So yeah, that's the move. And so for Europe, why we kind of landed there too is like Spain is on the doorstep of so much.
Yeah.
And it's safe and it's tucked away. And so it'll be a really fun year. I'll take lots of notes. So that way when you guys want to do your year or something like that, we'll have notes to compare.
Yes.
But we're really excited about it. And I'll say one thing, making this decision as a family has really unlocked a level of zest for life again in our family.
I imagine.
That you didn't realize was absent until you got it back.
Yeah. That's incredible. Dave, we just did the reason I mean, I'm excited for you no matter what, because this is it's so incredible and boundless and full of spirit and adventure. It's just really awesome. But while we were on vacation, spring break for us, we played a game where we started fantasizing about, like, what if we didn't live in the United States? Where would you live? And we had our kids playing with us, even the 7-year-old. And it was almost this, like, I'll start the portion of the story and then you pick up, what do we do next? And then you pick up, what do we do next? And
that's fun.
We created this whole storyline. And then when we were done, I said, so what if we actually go do that? And my daughter's face and eyes were like, what? And I was like, well, anything's possible. Maybe not right now. Maybe in a year, 2 years, 5 years, who knows?
But why not? Yeah.
You thought of it, so we can do it. It's possible. And it was such a fun thing. And then literally, I think
it was within a week.
You're like, we're moving to Spain. I'm like, shut up. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah,
well, we're so happy.
Came to me. She's like, you're never going to believe this.
I was literally jumping for joy. Yeah. I'm like,
so amazing.
Dave and his family are moving. Yeah. So
one of the things, if I can reflect this back to you about the both of you that I really love, is how you make that a conversation possible for your kids to participate in. Unapologetic dreaming, repairing conflicts. Like, these are sometimes things that happen in the shadows of our families. We don't actually have them at the table with our kids, right? And for you to include them in that, to experience the sense of wonder and possibility that's available to all of us. I think we're all cut from that cloth. I'm often reminded and remind myself in this process, like, I am increasingly less interested in what I leave my kids and more interested in the type of kids I leave.
Yes.
And Christ, I would much rather leave my kids with nothing to show, but a burning sense of possibility and wonder that if I imagine going to do something, I can go and do that. It's possible for me. Like, I'll spend all the money I got to be able to leave that deeply embedded in the heart of my kids.
Yep.
Right? Any day of the week. And I know you guys are the same.
Oh, so, yes. We're with you.
It's just so great. And that's where the dreaming starts. I think going back to our conversation today around, like, what does it mean to win? Like, the first step in going on that trip is talking about going on that trip. And maybe you go for a week and you just kind of test it out. And maybe you go for a month. It's all incremental progress that is directionally correct is what we kind of want to look for when it comes to making dreams come true. don't get too attached to the pathway, but just make little incremental progress that is directionally correct, and you'll be surprised how much the world will show you if you listen, right? So excited to follow along on your journey as it continues to build in Bunyan, and I'll keep you in the loop on ours as it continues to unravel too.
We're pumped to follow along. Thank you so much. What an incredible time well spent just now. I know everyone's going to enjoy looking you up, checking out the book, Chief Family Officer by Dave Inglis.
Which if somebody is watching and wants to get a copy, where's the best place for them to do that?
You know what? They cannot right now. If you're watching this before the middle of May, this book gets published May 16th. So if you're watching this now, the best place to kind of tag along would be to go to daveinglis.ca, and you can just kind of join the wait list. But other than that, once it comes out, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places you buy your books should be able to find it. And appreciate anybody who can pick it up, and more importantly, do the work. Right?
Fantastic. So we're about a month away.
Take some time on it.
I love it.
Okay. Do the work. Well, thank you, Dave. We so appreciate you.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to keeping up. When people are looking to just simply find you, where can they find you and follow along?
Yeah, you know what? LinkedIn, pretty active on there. Instagram, Dave Inglis. It's pretty easy to find me in all those.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then worst case, you can just send me a note through our website, daveinglis.ca. But thank you, Jess. Thank you, Justin. What a treat to hang out with the both of you.
Yes.
Let's do this again.
Great
yes,
seeing you
let's
again.
do it again.
Yes.
For sure. Say hi to Jen and the family.
I will. Thank you, too.
Cheers.
All right, that is a wrap on another episode of Thrive After Dark. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, if you have questions about anything that we talked about today, make sure to leave a comment below, and we will see you on the next one.